Hello everyone and welcome to the first episode of Black Cell Learning. We will talk about hardening. Basically, hardening is a process when you're trying to make your operating systems, infrastructure, hardwares and applications and user management more secure. This video is separated to 3 parts. On the first part, I will talk about the basics of hardening, like how to do hardening processes, hardening frameworks, etc. On the second part, I will show you how to audit a Windows system with the CIS CAT tool. And on the third part, I will talk about how to harden, how to audit the hardening on Linux systems with the Linus audit tool. But what is hardening? According to Wikipedia, in computing, hardening is usually the process of securing a system by reducing its surface of vulnerability, which is larger when a system performs more functions. In principle, a single function system is more secure than a multipurpose one. Reducing available ways of attack typically includes changing default passwords, the removal of unnecessary software, unnecessary usernames or logins, and the disabling or removal of unnecessary services. So basically, hardening is kind of like removing everything what's not necessary, and if they are all removed, then we will get a slightly reduced attack surface on the target system. Usually hardening is based on frameworks. These frameworks can be the CIS Center of Internet Security framework. This is the most well-known framework for hardening. DevSec sans-cis score. The difference between hardening frameworks and compliance frameworks is that the hardening frameworks are more explicit. They are having examples and they are having steps how to reduce this attack surface on different operating systems or different applications or on the network. Compliance frameworks are more like basic standards. They are telling you that okay, you have to remove the SHA-1 hash algorithm from your system, or you must use at least 3 DES, but they are not telling you how to achieve this. This is the main difference between them. Compliance frameworks are like PCI DSS, ISO IEC 27K 2013, etc. There are many. Well, everyone likes frameworks because frameworks are the bread and butter of life. So when you decide or you need to harden your operating system or your user management standards or application standards, then you have to do it carefully, really carefully, because if you're starting like, okay, no, I've just downloaded the CIS framework for Windows, and now I will start to harden my Windows, and usually in like 15 minutes you will be logged out from your operating systems, and then you have to start with reinstalling it. To avoid this, usually you have to cautiously plan. The steps for hardening. This is what's called planning. First of all, you have to define the purpose of hardening. What do you want to achieve by hardening this operating system, or hardening your network, or creating a framework for least privilege or segregation of duties? This is the definition of purpose. Secondly, create a customized security-usability matrix. Unfortunately, in our world, security and usability are each other's worst enemy. If you want to make things more secure, usually it's against the users. If you want to block Facebook and Gmail and some other social networking and emailing applications, then usually your users will revolt against you. You have your own fort made on security land, and the users are having their own fort on usability land. Sometimes you have to meet somewhere in the middle. After you created a security versus usability matrix and decided what steps to do on the field of hardening, then make some backup, and then some backup, and then some backup, and backup again. Usually backing up data and backing up operating systems, etc. Hardening usually comes in small pieces. If you decide what to do and with what to do, then usually there's a need to create a pilot project, like with 5 computers or something. After you've backed up the data, then you need to audit your present systems. You can do it via manually or via automatically. Usually for most of the ethical hacking pen testing tools are perfect for auditing, like Nessus or OpenVAS, but you can also use pre-made hardening frameworks for this job, like the CIS-CAT or Linus for Linux, for example, but there are many tools like this. After the automatic auditing is completed, then you need to manually validate the findings. And also you have to assess the findings of the audit. You can do it while comparing it to the security usability matrix. This is one of the most needed steps of these audits, because if there is a prerequisite for an application and you will disable the prerequisite, then the application will not run. So, for example, like the Java runtime environment. I've never met anyone who liked Java runtime environment, but somehow some people are programming in it. Therefore, for most of the applications, most of the pre-web applications are depending on it. With Java, you kill a vector for infection, but you also kill your application. It's a lose-lose, or a win-lose, at least. After the assessment and after everything ready on paper, then implement the hardened settings and test them thoroughly. After the implementation was a success, then the project is completed. Well, for once. If not, then you should roll back and start from scratch. Please note that as the threat landscape is changing, you have to cope with this landscape. Therefore, if you do a hardening audit once, it's not enough. You have to do it in like every 6 months or at least every year, depending on your environment. What can be hardened? You can harden your hardware, like you can disable the USB ports or disable the network ports, or change the BIOS UEFI password, or disable or at least quarantine your remote management ports, like your server management, like HP's ILO, because these ports are usually giving full access for the user. You can also harden your network, like you can disable ports or block applications. Also, you can segment your network. Segmenting is really important. And you can also implement like IDPS systems. IDS IPS means intrusion detection system and intrusion prevention system. Usually if you create your network based on a next generation firewall, these next generation firewalls are containing IDS or IPS modules, and they are quite easy to enable. You can also harden your operating system or applications. Usually the hardening frameworks are regarding operating systems and applications on them. You can disable operating system functions if you don't use them, like remote access for workstations, or you can harden applications and application runtime environments. Regarding hardening, endpoint protection systems are also tools to harden an operating system, also file integrity monitoring systems and EDRs, like endpoint detection and response systems, are also part of operating systems hardening. On the next two parts of this video, I will talk about the basic operating systems hardening. So without the applications and without the commercially available or open source tools, but there are many. And what is usually kind of forgotten field, but user layer hardening. User layer hardening is one of the most important fields, if not the most important field, because everything depends on the user layer, layer 8. Usually the problem is between the chair and the desk. If you don't educate your users to have a security mindset, and if you don't separate the duties of the employees or our users, you don't create role-based least privilege access models for the users, then eventually you will find that you can do everything on the infrastructure, both physically and both software, but eventually you will fail, miserably and unfortunately. And now something completely different. Here are we at the Windows hardening section of this video. As you can see, I have a quite outdated Windows 10. It's a fresh install on VMware, so it's a virtual machine. I will use the CIS-cat tool to do this audit demo. This CIS-cat is the official tool for the Center for Internet Security. You can download via the URL under the video, and it needs Java. So basically, to audit your system hardening, then you have to puncture a hole within your system by installing Java runtime environment. As you can see, there are benchmarks for different operating systems. Now we will use the Windows 10 Enterprise Release benchmark. It's a bit slow, but well, thank you very much for the Core i3 processor in this machine. We will use the level 1 profile. There are two different levels, level 1 and 2, and both with BitLocker. The level 2 is more like an audit profile for I don't know what, but it's more based on security than usability. As you can see, click on next and next and start assessment, and then wait. In the meanwhile, while we are waiting, first of all, if I've talked about Java, usually the hardening starts with by disabling the unused system services and unused runtime environments like Java or Flash or etc. Usually, if you're working in a standard Office environment, then you will not really using Java. If you're using like Office, web browsing, and stuffs like this, it's finished. Then we can see the reports. You can see there are 4 status for the tests. you can get different results when you're doing it on a used system, and also you can get different results when these systems are connected with Active Directory. No matter how big is your environment, Active Directory is strictly recommended, because with Active Directory you can manage more than one PCs at a time, like with GPOs. And especially if we're talking about hardening, then these group policies are really nice and fast ways to harden not just one, but many systems. Also, if you're creating an infrastructure from scratch, then I believe you should first of all you should just install fresh Windows in VMware or VirtualBox or any virtualized environment, and after run the hardening audit tests. After it assess these tests, and after the assessment is complete, then you can create a production image and start to install from scratch. If you're not installing from scratch, then somehow clone an ordinary Office PC and run the audit, assess the audit, and after it create the necessary changings via group policies or manually. As you can see, these tests are pretty thorough, from account policies through network stuff until domain and logon related. First of all, you should create a password policy what is hard enough to keep the enemy actors outside. So first of all, you should create a password policy and an account lockout policy. Both of these policies are against brute forcing these accounts, and also you should disable the system accounts, the built-in accounts like the administrator and guest and other accounts like this. This is needed to prohibit the password guessing, and it's also needed to enable accountability within your environment. So create named user accounts, use Active Directory, and disable all administrator privileged accounts where not needed. And also you can create named administrator accounts and named AD administrator accounts for people who are using them in their daily work. And after these are created, then you can create a role-based access model when people, for example, on the accounting are not really using much more than like Microsoft Office and their web browser and some accounting tools. Therefore, they don't need to execute programs any other than these. There you can see the user rights assignment, and it's account related, and also there is audit related, auditing and logging. Auditing and logging are the bread and butter of hardening a system, because if you don't know what's happened, then you don't know. And to uncover an enemy actor or a malicious actor from inside, then you have to know that who did that, who did changes, and when did them, and where did them. And well, if you know these three W's, then you will know the why, because you have a person to interview because or about the why. You can see the devices. The devices are important. It's important to have a USB policy within your organization. Usually it's better to have a whitelisting USB policy to whitelist only the usual USB devices within the environment. There are many hacking tools like the rubber ducky which are masking themselves as a USB human interface device like a keyboard or mouse. And if you're whitelisting the USB device ID, then you can also block these devices. Under the network access and network security section, you will see some accounts. Some accounts are registered. Under network security section, you will mostly see encryption and hash algorithms. Unfortunately, as the technology improves, the older encryption algorithms and also the older hashing algorithms will getting outdated, like the DES or SHA-1 algorithm. These can easily be broken or enumerated. It's good to keep in mind that you need proper encryption and proper hashing algorithms. Within system services, you will see system services. Wow, the disablement also applies here. So to disable every service that you're not using. Under the Windows firewall with advanced security, as you can see, we are having one nice block of failures. Usually these endpoint firewalls, like the Windows firewall or IP tables in Linux, are the last line of defense. Therefore, need to be switched on, and also they need to be in whitelisting mode. Whitelisting and blacklisting are two different philosophies. While blacklisting means that everything is allowed and you can disallow what you don't need or don't want, but whitelisting is everything is blocked and you can allow what you want. Whitelisting is a lot better philosophy than blacklisting, because there are new threats every day and you basically don't know what to block. There's also a logging category. Here it applies what I've said earlier regarding logging and auditing. Also, the log dropped packets is good if you want to debug something when an application is not communicating from the inside or from the outside properly. Under account management, you can mostly see auditing related stuff. Under the MS security guide, you can see that ensure configure SMB v1 client driver is not disabled. Well, I believe it's mainly because the outdated Windows 10 version. In later versions, SMB1 is disabled by default, like due to the WannaCry and other ransomwares and the NSA hack. And as you can see, the list is going on and going on and going on. This video is mostly about giving generic tips regarding hardening, and we will not go into the depth of hardening. And as you can see, as we got to the bottom of the list, then every section of this list is having a description, having a rationale, and a remediation and an impact. So this tool is quite good, because you can start it from scratch without just basic knowledge about hardening. And after you got the report, then you can read this report for like a month, and you will eventually understand what are these options and why are they good for. There was one section that I wanted to talk about, but well, unfortunately I scrolled down. It's about updates. Usually updating is good. Keeping your system up to date is good. But recently there were some Windows 10 updates which kind of like bricked whole computers. At the last feature update, I believe we've just had like 5 bricked computers which needed a complete Windows reinstall. Therefore, I suggest to wait some days with the Windows updates and to read about them a bit. So usually if something is foobar, then you will know from the internet in like no time. If you want to make Windows Update a whole new level, then you can use WSUS, like the Windows Offline Updater service. This will download the Windows updates, and after they are downloaded, then you can provision them on different computers. If you're having a larger environment, then you can create like pilot projects with like 5 or 10 computers, and if you can see that the update is working, then you can provision these updates into more computers. These were the last words regarding Windows 10. And we finally arrived the last section of this video, the Linux auditing and the Linus auditor tool. This tool is free to download from GitHub. No registering or anything is needed. Just try with git clone. You can see the URL in here, but you can also see it under the video. You can start this tool after installing with the Linus audit system command. And yes, it's a security check failed because I'm trying to run this with root, but this security check can be ignored. This auditing tool is capable of both local and remote auditing, and also it's having an enterprise version for larger environments, and it's also containing an audit and hardening planning software. So as you can see, it's kind of like the same as CISCat, but for command line interfaces. It's generated a report, but also you can scroll up if you're in an SSH terminal. You can see the test categories. There are suggestions like setting a password or regarding password strength, and also SSH configuration hardening. The audited OS in this case is the latest Ubuntu, and it's also running in a virtual machine. This tool is running on most of the Unix-based operating systems, so if you want to audit Mac OS or BSD, then it's also a great tool to do it.